Hi, welcome aboard. I'm sitting here in the Hydrofield factory at Woongoolga, about halfway between the Gold Coast and Brisbane, recovering after one of the toughest sessions I've ever had in rough water on a bar. Now, it was tough on me, but it wasn't tough on the boats we were in. The Hydrofields there have been built here for about the last 20 years. They've undergone 20 years of evolution and of development, which has brought them into a category which is not matched by any other type of boat, because the designer of the basic configuration, Len Field, has been involved in design consultation since the war. In fact, he worked in England as a consultant to the aircraft industry and was involved in the Sunderland flying boat program. Now, the Sunderland was a fabulous old aeroplane. In fact, it was largely responsible for the winning of the war by Britain because of its North Sea patrols. They used to call it the Porcupine because of the number of machine guns and cannons that it carried. A marvellous aeroplane, but it had a problem, and that was that it was difficult to get on and off of the water. And the reason for that was that there was a lot of suction generated under the hull by the hydrodynamic design, which tended to stick the aircraft to the water. Now, that meant that it had long takeoff runs and usually required a wave or a slot to get off the water. And it had very short landing runs, which meant that it pulled up quicker than you would have liked. Now, Len had a serious look at the Sunderland and decided that he could design a hull which would overcome all of those problems. But unfortunately, the authorities back in those days were too conservative, and Len Field's hull design wasn't tried until about 20 years ago, when he moved into the manufacture of boats on the Gold Coast. Now about 10 years ago, his son Leon Field joined Len in the business, and they've been building the Hydrofields and supplying them to a very appreciative market ever since. Now, I mentioned an appreciative market. It's up until now, it's been a relatively limited market in that the boats are designed to go well in rough water. Now, over the 20 years, they've supplied various areas of the market. They've looked at 60-footers, which would go through rough water, and then they've looked at ferries, they've looked at specialised areas. They build a lot of boats for the Navy, for instance. The Navy use a lot of Hydrofields in some very interesting ways, which we may be able to talk about sometime in the future. But recently they decided to provide boats which were designed for rough water work, for fishing, and to move into a specific area of the market and to do something that they've never done before. For the first time, they've established a retailer network around Australia. And under the impetus of that change in design and presentation philosophy, they've come up with a boat which was truly remarkable. Now, one of the things that makes it remarkable is that neither Len nor Leon are confined by a dedication to existing design principles. They've established their own design ideas, and they've pursued those ideas for 20 years. So the boats really have nothing in common with anything else on the water. And they come up with an astonishing degree of performance. Now, the story starts where they're built, in the factory. Let's have a look at that. As you've seen from the couple of glimpses we've shown you of these boats in rough water, their performance in rough water is truly remarkable. And it's remarkable for several reasons, all of them related to the design of the hull. Firstly, the centre of the hull is deeper than the outside wings, which helps the boats to turn. Secondly, and most unusually, it turns into a small plank there, then there's a step about amidships, and then the run of the boat flattens off aft and is relatively shallow in relation to the tunnels all the way down aft. Now, that not only allows the boat to get up on top of the water and plane extremely easily, but remarkably it will do it on horsepowers which are up to 30% less than the horsepower required for a similar size conventional hull. Now, that's a genuine saving in horsepower. It's not as if the boat lightly loaded will do it or under ideal conditions. An 18-footer with two 30 horsepower outboards on it will get up and do a genuine, comfortable 25 knots and maintain that speed regardless of the conditions, and up to a point regardless of the load. And when I say up to a point, I mean with 3 people, full fuel and fishing gear and all the rest of the stuff that you'd put in the boat for a day out, it will still retain that 25 knot performance. Now, that truly is remarkable. Now, the other aspect of the Hydrofield's performance which is truly remarkable is its soft ride. This is one of the gentlest boats, size for side, that I've ever ridden in. That's attributable firstly to the contour of the bow section and the lower keel there. Secondly, these strokes which run up into the tunnel, and thirdly, the contour of the tunnel. Now the white line you can see along there and along here is an actual wave break in the tunnel which curls the water around and agitates it further as the foam moves back through the tunnel. And one other aspect of it, this step here under normal circumstances would create drag by creating suction. The water goes past, there's a low pressure area developed behind the step, and that creates suction. What the fields have done is cut holes in there and feed air into those holes from tubes which pick up the air from the bow of the boat. So the low pressure area behind that step is completely relieved, and that's one of the major contributing factors in the ability of the boat to run so fast with such low horsepower. And that's amply demonstrated by the 16-footer with two 50s on it, running along quite happily with one motor tilted out of the water. Now the 18-footer had two 30s non-power tilt, the 16-footer had two 50 horsepower Johnsons with power tilt. There wasn't a lot to choose between the performance of the two boats, and my most vivid impressions are of a hull which really does fool you. You run along in water such as this, you see an approaching wave, you brace your knees to take the shock, and the boat quite remarkably just slides straight through the wave and really doesn't convey any of that nasty shock that we're used to at all. It really is a soft riding boat. The other thing is landing square, it's soft. It doesn't matter how crossed up the boat may be landing off a wave, it will simply get itself back onto an even keel virtually immediately and be off and running, which I believe really is attributable to the two tunnels and the two tubes of foam on which the boat slides along, and of course the relief of suction from behind the bottom keel. The other thing is the boat doesn't stop when it encounters oncoming water. With tunnels and boats such as this, normally you will encounter a really stop motion of the boat when it encounters an oncoming wave. It simply doesn't do that either. It goes without saying, for boats to be able to absorb the sort of punishment you've just seen these being given, they have to be strongly built. And if you look inside this half-finished hull, you can see it has very deep longitudinal members down each side of the tunnel. It has transverse members and then a heavy ply floor. By the way, the compartment in the middle there is for fuel tanks, and you can see how much fuel that would carry. Now the open cockpit area is around about 11 feet by 8 feet, which is 88 square feet, or around about 8 square metres. And the other interesting aspect of the way in which the fields are marketing these boats is that they're offering them in completed hull form but non-fitted out. In this country we're used to manufacturers and retailers offering us boats which have all the carpet, all the seats, every last fitting you could think of has been installed in the boat. In the case of these, because they'll be used by fishermen, because they're rough water boats, because of the amount of space in the boat, which makes the boats available for a wide variety of final uses, the fields have decided to leave them effectively completely bare. In fact, that boat over there is being pre-delivered, ready to go out the door, and that's the stage at which you buy a 16 or 18 Hydrofield. Now, it's an excellent idea. It minimises the amount of outlay that the purchaser has to make to get the boat, and he can then fit it out himself or have it fitted out to his own specifications. Now, if I had to find anything to complain about with these boats, I'd find it very difficult to do so. I mean, obviously the pictures you've seen have spoken for themselves. These are truly superb, fast, low horsepower requirement, rough water boats. In the case of the 18-footer, I found that there was a lot of spray blown aboard from underneath the tunnel. It came around the bow on either side and was blown aboard, and we got quite wet. Now, as an indication of the way in which development works, the fields discovered that when they first put it in the water, they modified the strakes in the centre hull, so that problem doesn't exist either anymore. So that really shows you the fruits and benefits of having a relatively small concern in which the people are interested and involved, and they're willing and able to make whatever changes and modifications are necessary in order to make the boats better. And by the way, if you don't want to buy the boat like that, if you want it fully fitted out, Hydrofield can provide the boats at any stage of construction you require. We'll be back right after this break.